So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the oppression of black males in America. African American or black individuals have always struggled in American society. From the beginning, their ancestors were brought to American soil purely for the labor they provided. Black author Ta-Nehisi Coates says in his book, Between the World and Me, that America was built on the backs of black people. Ever since the era of slavery, America has seen social change. Segregation by race has become illegal, black men and women see more opportunities in the workforce, and gradually students of all minorities have begun to find more open doors in education, starting with Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. However, though black men today enjoy more privileges than their ancestors, they still experience oppression every day in the country they helped to build. Let's look at their demographics. Though black individuals make up almost 15% of the general U.S. population, they continue to experience opposition in the country that claims they are free. That oppression can be seen in their educational and economic standing. Census records show that only 18.5% of black males have a bachelor's degree or higher. This could begin to explain why 27% of black males live below the poverty line as opposed to 11% for the general population, and also why 73% of black men are in the workforce as opposed to 83% for the general population. So we can see that there was a lot of legal, political, and social oppression for blacks in general, starting with slavery. Obviously, that was a huge part of America's history. And even after slavery ended, there was still segregation by public restrooms and public drinking fountains and even public schools. And long after segregation was outlawed, there still remained really negative stereotypes, which we're going to talk about later on. We can see that blacks weren't even given the right to vote until 1965, hundreds of years after everybody else was voting in the country. And today, there still remains that there's not a lot of blacks in the government. As of 2016, there were no black governors. And roughly 4 in 10 black adults say that working to get more black people elected to office would be a very effective tactic for groups striving to help blacks achieve equality. So, what are some of the negative consequences of this inequality in America? First, poor health. Numerous studies have reported that whites experience feelings of guilt, shame, anxiety, and helplessness, interwoven with a sense of intense confusion around issues related to racism. For blacks, racism has been associated with increased levels of depression, increased hostility, lowered life satisfaction and self-esteem, and feelings of trauma, loss, and helplessness. Studies also showed that perceptions of racially stressful situations may result in maladaptive feelings of anger, anxiety, paranoia, hopelessness, frustration, resentment, and fear in black children. Not only does racism affect individuals, but our country as a whole. It's no secret that political issues stemming from racism, such as police brutality, have torn our country. Based on the summary of stages of racial identity development, white Americans can either find themselves in the disintegration or reintegration stage. In disintegration, they will be moved to advocacy, which we can see is starting to happen, but still many find themselves in the reintegration stage, where they may feel that whites have earned the privileges they have. This leads to some of the discord we see. And lastly, the oppression of black males leads to educational gaps, which I'll be discussing more later on. Through the oppression, black Americans have developed a deep and beautiful culture. One way this group has learned to cope with the oppression they've experienced is through music. The following are lyrics from Beyonce's song Freedom, which was made during the heat of the Black Lives Matter movement. Freedom, freedom, I can't move. Freedom, cut me loose. Freedom, freedom, where are you? 'Cause I need freedom too. So let's look at some of the stereotypes that black individuals, particularly black males, face. One of the most dangerous and most damaging of stereotypes is that black men are dangerous, ghetto, or up to something illegal. In Between the World and Me, Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, he talks about this stereotype and how it has led to a disregard for the black body, most recently leading to a lot of police brutality. However, Coates also explains that this stereotype has instilled a deep fear in black people, a fear for their life and their bodies. The stereotype that black males are dangerous or violent is also a problem in the education systems because it causes overrepresentation in special education and increased suspensions, which I'll cover next. So the education system. When we look at this, I mean, it makes us wonder if segregation really did end. Brown versus Board in 1954 said that segregation was inherently unequal and schools began to become unsegregated to combat that oppression, but schools found other ways to segregate. Anthony Rotatori comments on disproportionality in special education in his text on multicultural education. He says, with regard to disproportionality, Smith reported that African American students constitute 33% of students classified as cognitively disabled and placed in special education, despite the fact that African American students only comprise 15% of the general student population. So we can see that normally with the general population, there's about 9 to 11% of students in special education, but with African American students, there's about 33%. So we can see there's a huge gap there. And there's also increased suspensions for black students. In the same text, Rotary said that in terms of school experiences and outcomes, students with special education needs are generally more likely to become involved in major disciplinary incidents, i.e. suspensions and expulsions, than are their peers in general education programs. So the biggest problem, like I have up here on the screen, is that there's Eurocentric teaching. Basically, that's teaching that's based on the achievement of white students, and it's kind of like that typical, the teacher lectures and you take a multiple choice exam on it. That's kind of the teaching that our education system has been used to for a very long time. But there are solutions, and the biggest solution would be culturally responsive teaching, which is basically we learn how minority students, particularly black students, learn, and then teachers arrange their materials in their class in a way that they can benefit from it, that it's not just Eurocentric. Another way is through authentic assessments, which is more based on studying the behavior and studying how a child does in real life situations, more than just testing them in that Eurocentric way, but finding other ways, creative ways that a student can express their learning. And tier interventions, or RTI, which is something that is being implemented in a lot of schools now. And it's making sure that students get the help that they need. So instead of children just being thrown into special education because of low test scores, the student first goes through a series of tiers, including a small group intervention or one-on-one tutoring before being recommended for special education. This should help eliminate the majority of disproportionality in special education and the oppression of blacks in the education system as well.